Hello and welcome back. Okay, so now it's time to get some important topics checked off of our list. Let's tackle the legality of job stacking first. Is job stacking legal? Well, it depends on what country you live in. My lawyers inform me that in the United States, it is not illegal to have multiple jobs, and that breaking a clause from a private contract or not abiding by it does not necessarily constitute an illegal act. You could get fired and at worst be sued in civil court, but it is not a criminal act. State law may vary in nuance regarding other points, however, like how many hours an employee can work, how many hours per week can be billed, so please consult with a lawyer on your own just in case. It should go without saying that I'm not a lawyer and this is not legal advice, so please ensure that you're clear on the legality aspects of engaging in job stacking and consult a lawyer. Please do it. To help you out, I've included a resource doc below this lesson to help you ask all the right questions of your attorney and accountant. I do not advocate breaking the law or doing anything illegal to pursue job stacking, so please go and check and do your own research. Oh, and a brief note on getting fired. The beauty of job stacking is that you no longer depend on a single employer, so even if you get fired somehow, even if you get caught by one employer, it's of little consequence since you will still have your other job, or maybe even jobs in plural. Plus, this course is all about how not to get caught while balancing multiple jobs. So if you apply what you learned here, you should be fine. In 4 years of having multiple jobs, I've never gotten caught, not even after publishing a book on the subject. Anyway, once you've established that it is legally safe for you, the next question is if job stacking is ethical. The short answer is that yes, it is. But to get the long answer, we need to unpack a lot of the current status quo assumptions about employer-employee relations. So the first thing we will examine is the completely unequal expectations regarding how employers and employees do business. The simplest reason why job stacking is ethical is the fact that companies or employers sell their services to multiple clients. No one demands or even expects employers to only have one customer, right? It's good business to have multiple clients. So why can't we have multiple clients as well? It would be laughably absurd to expect and demand that companies should only cater to one client at a time to avoid some potential conflict of interest. There is no expectation whatsoever of a company doing a bad job for one customer just because they lend their services to many other clients at the same time. So why are regular people who are employees treated with a completely different set of rules and assumptions? Why is it that we can't sell our services to other employers because of some potential conflict that hasn't even been made effective yet? As you can see, job stacking is not some heinous, unthinkable act. It's just doing what good businesses and what good businessmen already do, diversifying the sources of income, nothing more. The next thing we need to unpack is the fact that employers don't actually pay us to be exclusive. That's right. Employers offer no compensation for exclusivity, yet feel entitled to it. Let's go back to the fact that companies have multiple clients. They have multiple clients in part because having one source of revenue puts you in a very fragile and weak position, like you as an employee find yourself right now. So if a particular client wanted exclusivity, they would have to offer explicit and thorough compensation to make up for the lost opportunities of doing business with others. Well, turns out employers pay no such compensation to their employees from whom they demand exclusive use of their services. A key concept to understand here is what I call total potential productivity. Simply put, total potential productivity is all of the work that you could do or how productive you could be. Employers feel entitled to and demand your total potential productivity, but they don't actually pay for it. To better understand this concept, let's imagine a plumber. Our imaginary plumber could fix 100 toilets each month and get paid for each one he fixes. His total potential productivity is 100 fixed toilets per month. If you hired him to fix your one toilet, you would be paying him for 1% of his total productivity, and he would be giving you 1% of his productivity. So far, so good, and we seem to have a fair deal, right? But now let's assume that for whatever reason, you really don't like the idea of this plumber going out there and fixing some other people's toilets. You only want him to fix your one toilet. What could you do? What would you do? Well, the obvious answer would be to approach him and tell him that each month you will pay him the equivalent of the 100 toilets he fixes each month, but that in exchange, he can't respond to any calls from someone that isn't you. In other words, You're telling him that he can't go and fix somebody else's stuff. He has to remain exclusive to you. And for that, you're paying him for 100 toilets. This seems fair at first, but it's actually not enough because we have to consider that the plumber would make a lot of people mad if he stopped going to their houses and not answering their calls, right? Plus, maybe he likes some of his customers better than you, so just having the equivalent amount of money isn't enough to persuade him. On top of that, there's an uncertainty factor to consider. Our plumber doesn't actually know how long you could pay him for the 100 toilets, and it might be very hard to get some of his lost customers when he signs up with you. So then he wouldn't be paid by you, and he wouldn't be able to make up the lost money. So in order to secure his exclusivity, you would have to pay him a lot more than just the equivalent of 100 toilets. It would require something like the equivalent of 200 or 300 toilet fixes each month, plus a big lump sum bonus up front to cover any potential short-term uncertainty. Now the deal seems a bit more sensible and fair, and maybe now it makes sense for our plumber to sign exclusively with you. Sounds reasonable, right? Do you agree? Now tell me, in your experience, do employers offer compensation to employees resembling something anywhere close to what we just said was reasonable for exclusivity? In all my years working, I've never seen it happen to me or to anybody else. There is simply no talk of compensating exclusivity. The compensation offered to employees is just that, their wages to do their job. It is not a buyout of the employee's total potential productivity to take you out of the market and work for only one employer. They're not paying you for that. Again, employers just assert implicitly that they're owed something which they do not pay for. But since they don't pay for it, they have no legitimate right to claim it. Now, you may be asking yourself, wait a minute, Rolf, didn't you tell me that employers actually pay employees so that they can be available when needed? Doesn't that mean that they do pay for us employees to work exclusively for them? And the answer is no, because availability is not the same as exclusivity. We can have multiple employers while complying to be available for all of them, and in fact, that's an essential part of job stacking, honoring our availability to our employers. But exclusivity is completely different and goes beyond availability. For instance, calling 911 in an emergency is available to all of us all of the time, and yet is exclusive to no one in particular. No one person or institution has exclusive rights to call 911. So here, you can already see how availability is different from exclusivity. The truth is that employers have been able to get away with not paying us to be exclusive simply because being physically in an office to do our jobs prevented us from doing something about it. But now that we can work remotely, there is absolutely no reason to keep honoring any claims of exclusivity unless explicitly and handsomely compensated for it. So, how much productivity do you actually owe your employer, right? Because we do owe something to them. The simple approach I use is this. As long as you don't get fired for low performance, it's assumed that your productivity and performance are satisfactory, and that is as much as you need to give. It is what the employer itself has deemed it's owed in practice, not in some theoretical concepts, but in real life execution. So at this point, I hope you are fully convinced that job stacking is indeed ethical. But I know one last objection could be raised by some, so let's get it out of the way and refute it. The last objection someone like Dave Ramsey could make is that we freely signed an employment contract, and in that contract, we gave away our exclusivity to the employer, and in that contract, we say we would work X amount of hours, and that not doing so willingly and knowingly is unethical. So first, let's dismantle the idea that just because there is a contract and someone signs it, that the contents of the contract are ipso facto valid, authoritative, or legitimate without any question. We already don't recognize the validity of plenty of contracts. For example, we don't allow anyone to sign away their liberty and rights to become somebody's slave, even if they do so willingly. We don't allow it even if they sign it freely and of their own will. So the idea that some signed contract is a sacred thing that must always be honored no matter what is simply not true. But I do recognize that this notion alone doesn't fully refute the argument. After all, the contract could somehow still be considered legitimate by others, and even in a court of law, like they did with slavery contracts in the past. So now, let me tackle the idea that we as employees freely sign these employment contracts. Unfortunately, we don't do so freely. Freedom implies choice, but we have very little choice when it comes to the fact that we need to feed ourselves and our families, and that we need to do so right now. Not in some future time when we start our own business and it pays off, or where we study the right thing and are swimming in job opportunities. No. we need to pay for food, shelter, clothes now. So in these circumstances, employees actually have no freedom to choose. All the power of choice rests with the employers. It's you, the employee, who has to prove yourself to your prospective employer in an audition called a job interview. Companies are the ones that get sent dozens of resumes for a single position, and they're the ones doing the choosing, not you. Even when companies are recruiting, all they're really doing is reaching out to someone and telling that person that they think they would do well in their audition process. So please consider sending your resume, and you're gonna be among a pool, you're gonna be in a pool of many other applicants. Picture someone who is unemployed and desperate to make ends meet. Think of all the resumes and cover letters that had to be sent. Then after going through multiple grueling interviews and hearing no response, finally, an offer letter is sent by a potential employer. Do you really think there is freedom in signing that contract, no matter what illegitimate things it might contain? Listen, freedom was never present in the equation. There are 7 billion people on the planet. Do you think there are more than 7 billion jobs on the planet? You're not choosing. You are not free. Oh, sure, no one puts a gun to your head to sign the contract. But if the litmus test for coercion is having a gun to your head, then I'm afraid almost nothing is coerced in life, including things we had no say or choice over, like the language we speak. So I guess we could say that we are as free to sign employment contracts as we are free in choosing the language we learn to speak as toddlers. Well, this lesson has gone long enough, but I want to conclude by saying we're absolutely justified in trying to better our own conditions by selectively breaking or ignoring rules and standards companies unilaterally establish in their favor. Rules like you must work for us during this given time. Employers demand exclusivity and loyalty from their employees without providing set loyalty to them or explicit compensation for the opportunity costs we incur by working only for them. As if to make a mockery out of it, we have to endure constantly witnessing C-level executives sit at the board of multiple organizations or straight out having multiple jobs while they condemn a regular employee for doing it. But please be assured that the intention is not to hurt the companies we work for with job stacking. In fact, a central premise of job stacking is continuing to do satisfactory work for employers to stay employed. Job stacking is not about doing things like misusing confidential information to extort or damage employers, or to leverage or knowledge of one employer to hurt the business of another. This is not some quest for revenge where we're trying to destroy our oppressors. We're simply ignoring dumb, unilateral rules that companies establish in a total overreach of control over our lives. Namely, that we can only work for them exclusively at any given time, or that they fully own us, our time, or our full potential productivity. Are you tracking with me so far? Nice job. Meet me in the following video.